Hey there, and welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take all that information you've shared with us, articles, notes, research, and we really try to dive in, pull out what matters, and help you make sense of it all. Cut through the noise, basically. And today we're looking at something, well, pretty significant, something really unprecedented, actually, involving a key expert group at the CDC, the one that advises on vaccine recommendations.
That's right. And for this deep dive, we're working mainly from excerpts of a CNN article by Sarah Owermol and Meg Terrell, plus a briefing document that pulls from that same source material you sent over.
Okay, so our mission today is pretty clear. We want to unpack exactly what went down, try to understand the reasons given for it, at least as stated in the sources, and then look at the immediate reactions, the pretty strong criticisms that are laid out, and explore what the potential consequences might be according to this information.
Exactly. It's all about making sense of what can be a complex event, using only the information you've provided us.
All right, let's get into it. At the heart of the material you shared is this, well, quite dramatic action taken by the U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Uh-huh. The specific action described is the dismissal. Not just one or two people, but the entire 17-member Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, ACIP for short. And ACIP, just to clarify, that's the expert panel. They're the ones advising the CDC on the U.S. vaccine schedule, what immunizations are recommended or required.
And here's a detail from the material that really jumps out.
Hmm.
This wasn't some internal memo. It was announced publicly in a Wall Street Journal op-ed. And get the reports say some of the members who were dismissed, they didn't even get official notice until after that op-ed came out.
Yeah, that's highlighted. And what's really emphasized across the board in these sources is how unprecedented this is. ACIP members usually serve like 4-year terms. Taking out the whole panel prematurely like this, it's described as highly unusual. No precedent for it, apparently.
So, okay, why? What reasons were actually given for such a drastic step?
Well, Secretary Kennedy's justification, as it's cited in the material, is his claim that ACP is, and this is a quote, plagued with conflicts of interest. He makes a couple of specific arguments laid out in the sources. One, that many members were last-minute appointees from the previous administration. He suggests political motives there. And he also apparently stated that without doing this, his administration wouldn't have been able to appoint a majority of new members until, like, 2028. And there was another reason given, too. He alleged ACP hasn't been, quote, transparent in its vaccine recommendations.
Okay, but this is where it gets really interesting, right? Because the material you sent us also includes a lot of pushback on those reasons. A lot.
Oh, absolutely. The sources shared details that seem to directly challenge Kennedy's claims about conflicts. For instance, it notes that ACP had actually very recently published detailed info on conflicts and financial disclosures for all its members, going way back from 2000 right up to 2024. And there's a really strong reaction quoted directly from one of the ACIP members who was just dismissed. They flatly refuted Kennedy's claims. They're quoted saying ACIP has the most rigorous conflict of interest policy of any organization that I know of, and added, Kennedy knows better. Pretty strong words.
Wow, yeah.
Plus, the sources mentioned that numerous other health leaders in major institutions are calling his allegations completely unfounded. And another key point made is that ACIP members aren't actually considered political appointees in the usual sense.
Okay, so let's pivot to the impact. What are the practical consequences, the concerns being raised in these reports as a result of this?
Well, like we said, ACIP's job is advising on the national vaccine schedule. Super important stuff. So the material explains that dismissing the committee basically removes the primary expert body that guides these critical public health decisions. And there were immediate effects noted, too. Apparently, the vaccine schedule was updated just shortly before the dismissal was announced, but without ACIP's input. Also, a CDC official who oversaw COVID-19 vaccine recommendations resigned the Friday just before this all happened, reportedly following some changes from HHS.
Interesting timing.
Very. And the sources synthesize these really significant fears that critics are voicing. Things like, this move could fundamentally destabilize vaccination in America, that it might further fuel the spread of vaccine-preventable illnesses. And the context given there is, the ongoing measles outbreaks and already declining childhood vaccination rates. So the timing, again, seems critical.
Yeah, that context is worrying.
And also that it leaves health professionals feeling like they're without critical scientific expertise we rely on.
Wow. So it creates a real vacuum in terms of guidance.
That seems to be the major concern, yeah. And there's even a note that some providers might now feel they need to, create a parallel committee to ACP that they can trust. Imagine that.
Setting up their own expert panel.
That's the concern being floated. And the reactions documented, they are really, really strong. That dismissed member we mentioned earlier, they're quoted saying they've never seen anything this damaging to public health. Dr. Richard Besser, former acting CDC director, is cited calling the whole idea that ACIP failed to scrutinize vaccines absolutely absurd. He's also quoted saying Kennedy has done the most to sow unwarranted doubt and shows a complete lack of caring.
Strong words indeed.
And there are more. Dr. Bruce Scott from the AMA says it upends a transparent process that has saved countless lives. Dr. Tina Tan calls it reckless, short-sighted, and severely harmful. And Dr. Mike Osterholm, another well-known public health figure, is cited calling it one of the darkest days in modern public health.
So the overwhelming message from these experts cited in the reports is that this undermines trust.
Absolutely. That's a central theme coming through in the material undermining trust in vaccines and in public health institutions more broadly.
And the material also mentions there's actually an ACIP meeting already on the books, scheduled soon. That adds another wrinkle.
Yes, exactly. It gives dates. June 25th to 27th, which means from the time of the announcement, HHS had roughly just 2 weeks to appoint an entirely new panel, 17 experts.
2 weeks. To replace an entire expert committee like that? That sounds incredibly fast. Is that even feasible?
Well, that speed itself is a major point of concern highlighted in the material. It quotes a law professor, Dorit Rice, who specializes in vaccine policy. She notes, appointing people this fast means they were not properly vetted, and there is no real time to check conflict of interests issues. And she adds, according to the source, that this process will not restore trust in vaccines and is not designed to do so.
That's a significant critique of the replacement process itself. And what about political reactions? Did the sources mention how politicians are responding?
Yes, it does cover some of that. It specifically mentions Senator Bill Cassidy. The reports describe how he'd previously supported Kennedy's confirmation, apparently based on a pledge Kennedy made to consult on appointments and, crucially, to maintain ACIP.
Oh, interesting. So he got a pledge about ACIP specifically.
That's what the source indicates. And now, Cassidy's quoted expressing significant concern. He stated the fear is that the ACIP will be filled up with people who know nothing about vaccines except suspicion. Though the material also notes that when CNN pressed him on whether he regretted his confirmation vote, he declined to comment.
Okay. Any others mentioned?
Senator Susan Collins is also cited. She apparently called the move excessive and said it raises serious questions.
Right. So given all this fallout, all these concerns, are there any alternative approaches or responses being discussed, according to the information you looked at?
There is mention of one specific initiative, the Vaccine Integrity Project. The material notes it was actually launched a bit earlier this year, precisely because of concerns about people casting unfounded doubt on the safety of well-studied vaccines.
Okay, so it predates this specific event.
Yes, but now, in light of the ACIP dismissal, the sources say this project is considering whether there's a need for a new, independent body, one that could evaluate vaccine safety and effectiveness, potentially filling that gap or trust deficit.
So, stepping back, what does all this really mean for you, the listener? This deep dive into the material you shared really lays bare an unprecedented move, a major shakeup affecting a key group that shapes health advice that touches everyone.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating, I think, is how the material presents these two starkly different narratives right next to each other. You have the justification offered by the secretary, conflicts of interest, transparency issues, political appointees, and then you have this widespread, almost unified, very strong condemnation from public health experts, from institutions, even some political figures cited, expressing deep concern about the process, the speed, and the potential damage to public trust and health outcomes.
Right. So understanding this whole event, with the reasons given on one side and this massive pushback detailed on the other, it really helps you see just how complex public health guidance can be. And you get a sense of the different forces and perspectives at play when these established, long-standing processes get changed so dramatically so quickly.
Which really leads to a big question, something for you to think about based on everything we've discussed from these sources. In today's world, we're overloaded with information, right? And we need guidance we can trust, especially on critical things like public health. So how should that expert advice system be structured? How should it be protected? And maybe most importantly, how can trust in that advice be built up or rebuilt, especially when you see major disruptions like the one described here?
Yeah, definitely something to mull over. Think about what really stood out to you in the details we explored today from the material provided. Until our next deep dive.